After all the hype that you've heard over the course of the last 2 years about the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management, we're proud to announce our new venture, the Women of Conservation Calendar, that showcases and celebrates the women that helped defeat Proposition 127. 14 months of the calendar of all of the women that helped, plus more, the convention dates, deadlines, draw application dates, commission meetings, and things going on at the Colorado State Capitol. This is an opportunity to support CRWM and the efforts that we continually work on through the Colorado State Capitol, Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission, and to address all of the ballot issues that continually arise. We've got some fantastic sponsors that help prop up and just showcase who these women are. Rodeo queens, barrel racers, houndswomen, general sportsmen, mothers, and every avocation you could think, from archery hunting to muzzleloading to rifle hunting and waterfowl as well. These women stuck their necks out to help save the hunt. Get it for yourself. It makes a great gift. Make sure you get it before Christmas, and look at all the other important dates that are coming up. $24.95, SaveTheHuntColorado.com. If you're looking to explore your opportunities to hunt out west, maybe try Colorado. If you're trying to get information about bighorn sheep, elk, deer, private land, public land, maybe it's everything that you want to do as far as pack-in trips. Maybe it's just having a pack trip decided for you, and then when you get there, you just hunt out of a drop camp. Make sure you check out the Colorado Outfitters Association. Colorado Outfitters Association here in the state of Colorado has got a numerous amount of outfitters that are members, and they can supply you with whatever you're looking to try to acquire and what you want to do for the hunt of a lifetime. For more information, check out the ColoradoOutfitters.org, and make sure that you let them know that you heard about them with Through the Gates, and let them know that you're trying to continue to save the hunt in the state of Colorado. We always talk about supporting businesses that support our efforts to be able to save the hunt in Colorado. Well, the Colorado Shed Company in Penrose, Colorado, just outside Canyon City, is one of those partners. Colorado Shed has been building sheds in the state of Colorado for the last 10 years and is actually owned by sportsmen and women. They support the efforts of what the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management has done, and they also support all the organizations that you're probably a member of. Whether you're looking for small modular type buildings, sheds for your property to store the extra hunting equipment, or maybe just to turn around and put that freezer in for all the meat that you've got, check out Colorado Sheds. They also do pole barns and can do custom manufacturing to whatever your heart desires. She sheds, man caves, it doesn't matter. Check out coloradosheds.com. Through the Gates is produced under the support of the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management to enhance, promote, and defend the North American model of wildlife conservation and responsible wildlife management. That's our mission. We're engaged in fighting at every level so that wildlife management remains science-based and conservation continues to work for our wildlife. To learn more and join the movement, visit SaveTheHuntColorado.com. The North American model of wildlife conservation is the greatest conservation model in the world. It's a success story that should be shared and celebrated because everybody is a part of it. So we have another update episode of Through the Gates to Save the Hunt, and we are at the Northwestern Junior College in Sterling, Colorado. We just got done with the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting here, a day and a half, a lot of different things discussed. And I'm privileged and pleased to have one of our counterparts, one of our partners, Mr. John Swartout, who is involved with the United Wolf Coalition. And John and I have known each other for quite a while. But John, give us a little bit of background on who you are, where you came from, how long you've been doing whatever, and how the hell we got into this predicament that we're having to deal with Colorado Natural Resources.
Yeah, I started my work back in early 90s. And I worked for a U.S. Senator, and then I worked for Governor Bill Owens when he got elected in 98. And the idea then, we're tail end of the Clinton administration. We were dealing with a vice president, Al Gore, who championed these causes like grazing free in 93. They wanted to kick all the agriculture people off their federal grazing leases. And at some point in the process, President Clinton, who was kind of a consensus builder, as a president, realized that he was going from one adversarial discussion to the next, whether it was the fish in Oregon and that the vice president kept putting him in this position. And Governor Roy Romer of Colorado decided that the adversarial way of approaching wildlife, natural resources issues was counterproductive, and offered President Clinton a kind of a way out of this debacle that he created, creating adversaries out of people that hunt and fish and creating adversaries out of agriculture. Why not, rather than create adversaries, have partnerships? And so Romer started this effort to build partnerships between counties, local governments, rural, especially agriculture, people that hunt and fish, on finding a way they could work together to improve the resource, but improve the experience, whether it's hunting or agriculture. How could we work together?
Well, this is, and not to interrupt, but this is the same time that we had Initiative 10, 1992, and then
Right.
moving into Amendment 14,
Right.
constitutional amendment on Amendment 14.
Right.
The same time that all of these things started to culminate and escalate in the state of Colorado.
Right. Yeah, it was exactly the same time. And Romer kept coming to this idea that the better path, the path that was best for Colorado, was collaboration and partnership. It wasn't perfect. Romer was imperfect, like every governor is, but he understood the value of it. So he spent time in rural Colorado. He sat down with people. Unlike the current governor, he would go out and meet with people that disagreed with him. I mean, that's where the benefit is. If you just talk with people that agree with you all the time, and you don't really establish partnerships with groups that disagree with you, you never get anything done. So, and what came out of that was Great Outdoors Colorado came out of that discussion. You know, the ballot initiative that brought lottery money, separated it from the state and gave it to, you know, the Great Outdoors Colorado board that was created. We started funding private land conservation in this state, which is how I started. Started working with Colorado Parks and Wildlife to, at that point,
The Division of Wildlife at the time.
Division of Wildlife. I started working with them to try to get private landowners to be willing to meet with them, work with them. And the relationship at that time in the early 90s was terrible. It was adversarial, and agriculture and others felt like the Division of Wildlife was trying to impose things on them. So it took time to build trust. And we spent years building trust, not just to do conservation work and other things to improve wildlife habitat into the state, because Romer understood where others didn't, that private land plays a crucial role in wildlife habitat. And we were losing private land at an astonishing rate, you know, whether it was 35-acre development of large parcels of land, or just an unwillingness of landowners and local governments to work with the state. So it took a long time, and we built this partnership. I think we preserved about 2 million acres of private land in this state through GOCO grants and other things, and through programs with the Division of Wildlife. And it made a difference. It's why we have quality habitat in this state. Without that effort, I think you know, a lot of those wildlife corridors would have been gone.
So did you work directly with the Owens administration as well?
Yes, that was my job, was to help create these partnerships.
And then you went from there to Ritter.
No, I went there. From there, I went to Great Outdoors Colorado, where I was the director for 7 years.
Okay.
Great Outdoors, and we emphasized ag land preservation, private land conservation, in ways that the prior boards hadn't. Not everything has to be the state owning property or free title acquisition by Division of Wildlife. We created how could we come up with partnerships with that, especially ag, to enhance wildlife habitat, where the landowner benefited from it financially, as well as, you know, benefit from having wildlife habitat. And what the other thing that Bill Owens focused on was it was the beginning of giving hunting licenses to these large landowners that had done things on their property to enhance habitat. In exchange for that, they got licenses, and they could hire outfitters, and they could create a small amount of hunting income, which in bad ag years really makes a difference.
You bet.
And Owens really focused on that, and his director, the Department of Natural Resources, Greg Walcher, really focused on, you know, building these partnerships up over the years.
Completely different set of circumstances than what we have now.
Right.
And it wasn't nearly as convoluted during the Ritter or the Hickenlooper administration as what it's become now. And the reason I'm focusing on that, we just got done with a day and a half of meetings up here, that the first 35 minutes of yesterday's meeting befuddled even people that were sitting on the commission side, but the agency staff and people on both sides of the aisle that just looked in disbelief that how do you go from commission comments to something that wasn't even on the agenda? Backing all the way up from Owens to here, have you ever seen a level when the Department of Natural Resources, Division of Wildlife, Colorado Parks and Wildlife has been in a position of befuddlement, like what it is at this point in time?
Well, it was designed and created to be a Type 1 agency because of the science function within the agency. And the idea was that science and the development of policy and the science needed to be protected against political interference. And the commissions over the years really maintained that kind of independence. And, they make decisions where half the people in the room are happy, half aren't happy, but they try to make it based on the science. So as this has become more politicized, especially under this administration, with undue influence by the governor on their decisions, they've lost a fair amount of independence. And consequently, these meetings become convoluted because they're not the decision makers, right? That they used to be.
They haven't put their foot down hard enough to say enough is enough.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And when you saw the transition between Owens and Ritter, and then eventually up to Hickenlooper, and then Hickenlooper came in and with the help of Executive Director Mike King,
right,
they formulated the merge between Colorado Division of Wildlife and Colorado Parks,
right,
and then they became Colorado Parks and Wildlife.
right.
That was a contentious time in wildlife management because of the unknowns. Now, that's not the first time that they had merged. They'd merged several other times that were disbanded. And because Ritter was only a 4-year governor,
right,
and then Hickenlooper comes in and takes 8 years.
Right.
Is this a slow transitional process to ends up where we're at? Or did it just kind of happen, starting with Governor Polis, to end up where we're at because of the animal rights extremism and the mentality that agriculture and wildlife don't really matter unless it's somebody's particular way?
Yeah, I think I was involved in creating Division of Wildlife and making an enterprise, because they were tied to Tabor, everything else. And so we fought really hard with folks like Rick Enstrom, who was on the Wildlife Commission at the time, Russ George, who ran the Division of Wildlife, to create an enterprise at the Division of Wildlife. And so that they could spend more of the money that they brought in through licenses and fees and hunting. I mean, people don't realize that hunters provide the bulk of the income for the agency. I don't think the general public gets that. But the problem was always state parks. And because they were general fund recipients. And then there was a decision made by the legislature to take away parks general funds. So they were always kind of the poor stepchild. And yet parks were visited and used, and they barely ever had the money. And they got additional GOCO money for parks, but that money was more based on acquisition of new land for parks or new leases to create a state park. So this problem was a financial one when the agencies merged. It was that, parks was broke, essentially. Most of the parks don't make money. There was a role for the state to subsidize parks, and they backed out of that role.
But with all transparency, the wildlife side doesn't pay for the park side.
Right.
I mean, people still have the concept that wildlife was meant to unbury parks.
Right.
Nothing could be further from the truth.
No.
That can't happen.
Well, and during Romer, there was actually a federal lawsuit and investigation of the merging of money between, the formula for wildlife's money, especially their federal money, has prohibitions on commingling that money with the other part of the agency. And they got busted for that and had
In the Romer days.
in the Romer days. And it created a real, like, these things have to be separate. So there wasn't a way for wildlife to provide money for parks.
So financially, what could have been the ultimate goal or benefit for parks and wildlife to be merged outside of sharing buildings and staff and resources at the upper level, the management level?
Right.
But is there another financial benefit that the general public doesn't know? And then I'll get into the nuances of that.
Yeah. I mean, financial benefit is they can, you said it, they can merge some of their higher level agency people, but that doesn't affect the state parks at all. And, and governors have been pretty aggressive about wanting to add new parks. Romer added a bunch. This governor has made it a huge priority to have parks. But the other thing that's difficult here is that the GOCO money from their constitutional amendment that created them makes it really hard to substitute. If the state was paying for something, there's a clause in the constitutional amendment that created GOCO says they can't substitute the money. So GOCO is limited in the way they can help parks, especially parks, and in their mission. Like paying for FTE, that kind of stuff wasn't part of, if the state was originally paying for that, it's hard for GOCO to come in and backfill that. Even though they bring a significant amount of money, the money's prescribed in how parks and wildlife can use it.
So the way things have transitioned to get to where we're at today, did the merge help create this operational conundrum on the wildlife side, or is it completely separate and just because of what Governor Polis and his spouse have brought to the table? I mean, I guess if it was still Division of Wildlife and Colorado Parks, would we, in your opinion, still be in this conundrum of circumstances with the commission, with the administration, or would it be different?
I think they're almost two separate things. I think the deterioration of the relationship under this administration has been because they don't work with people. I mean, I went to work for Governor Hickenlooper as a Republican to address the rural urban conflict, because Hickenlooper recognized that we weren't working with these people hard enough. And he always said, you have to really talk to people who disagree with you, and you have to really listen to what they have to say and create a forum for that. And that did a lot to help those partnerships go along. And when the federal government broke its word and listed the Gunnison sage-grouse, for example, Governor Hickenlooper sued the President Obama's administration on the listing because it was a breaking of the promise that they made. If we did everything that they asked us to do, we'd keep the bird off the list. And then they ended up listing the bird on basis, as they told us, Fish and Wildlife Service told us under two different administrations that they wouldn't do. And we sued them and lost in federal court, but those landowners knew the state had their back. Right? That was the importance of it. Win or lose the lawsuit, the point is the governor had the back of the people that had done $40 million worth of conservation in that valley. And I think that's probably the most important thing that's been lost, is that the landowners that make such a huge difference in providing wildlife habitat don't feel that the state has their back anymore. Those relationships they're withering.
Becoming increasingly severed.
I mean, counting, and a lot of landowners are closing their gates to people from CPW. And it's a shame, because trust is generational.
Well, it took a hell of a long time to build up to that level, to the point to where it was cyclical. The good, the bad, depending. Some of it was generational inside the agency and outside the agency. Some of it was a transparency and accountability. Some of it was process and procedure. Some of it might have been geographic, to where the Southeast or the Southwest was handled differently because of the structure of those geographic areas. But now it's almost become apparent that that's statewide. It's within the boundaries of Colorado because of wolves and because of
Right.
animal extremism, because of the attack on agriculture,
Right.
because of the attack on oil and gas,
Right.
just the way this administration has handled the urban-rural divide side of things,
Right.
and allowed some of that other stuff to escalate in appearance and kind of drag out the conversation.
And most of the success that we had, conservation efforts, creation of Sand Dunes National Park, and other really big achievements that we've had were all about people working together. And what I found over the years is you go where people live, you sit down and talk to them, you listen to what they have to say, and even if the outcome isn't everything they want, there's a sense that they've been heard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the largest disconnect is the governor has the idea of what to do and how to do it. And if and when there is a stakeholder meeting, let's say CPW puts a stakeholder meeting together, people will walk into that room, like you've seen this with fur bearers and the petitions. They walk into that room saying it's already been decided, the how and the what's already decided.
Mm-hmm.
Or why are we even sitting at this table? Because the outcome's already been chosen.
Yeah.
This is a facade and it isn't real. It's not a real stakeholdering process. Romer used to roll up his sleeves and listen to people. He'd cut a deal that maybe these people got 40% of what they wanted on the landowner side, but they'd been heard, it was a real negotiation, and they stayed in the process because of it. Like I said, it's not about one side getting everything they want. It's about a real exchange.
And I've sat on so many different stakeholder groups and focus groups and working groups and just look at the process, and very few have come out to where I would consider them to be valuable for the cause and the resource. Not my side, not somebody else's side, for the actual reason that you got together.
Right.
But when there's an increasingly level of frustration between polar opposite parties, that you look at each other during a break or at the end and completion of the working group that might last 2, 4, 5, 8, 10, 12, 15 months.
Right.
I mean, the Wolf Stakeholder Advisory Group is 18 months.
Yes.
When you walk away and everybody's like, I think we did okay, but I'm not sure. And then it's never adhered to. And you're like, why the hell did we dedicate times of our lives for that, for the cause, to give people this grandiose idea that, these people are coming together with their perspectives, if it's just going to be disregarded and cast aside.
Right. And it creates a lack of sustainability.
Oh, yeah.
So, for example, with landowners, when I first started talking to them, they'd come through a tough time. And in the early 90s, they'd come through a tough time. They were attacked, trying to get rid of their federal grazing leases. They were very defensive and not all that interested in talking to any form of government, state or federal. And it took a long time to build up that trust. And we made huge progress. And the problem is now that if you lose that trust with these landowners, you don't just lose it for 10 years, you lose it for a generation. Mm-hmm. The consequences of what's taking place right now is we could lose landowners for a generation and a half.
Well, and one reason I think that happens is because when you're talking about, and when I was involved in the 90s for the Bear Initiative and the Trapping Initiative, we didn't have this social media conundrum to where information was distributed and dissected immediately upon somebody speaking or an event happening. Yeah. It took weeks of saturation and exposure to work through the channels because not everybody had something at their fingertips. Right. Now, not only do they have it at their fingertips, they can respond prematurely and probably unprofessionally to exacerbate or to over-exaggerate something that's happened. And I believe that it's a significant benefit for engagement, but it has been so detrimental that it has watered down a lot of the engagement because it's like an instant drama. It's a dopamine effect where people go, I got the first word out and I said this, and did you see what I did? And pretty soon somebody else takes offense to that, or they got the wrong information and they share it, and it breeds this level of inconsistency. There's a lot of things that are going on that at this day and age that we can't control. But like today's meeting or what we heard yesterday, before they even got done with testimony, people were posting it.
Right.
Well, that taints engagement and involvement
Yeah.
from a large variety of people, and politicians are part of that whole cycle.
Right. And it exacerbates the conflict. And I remember as a kid, when John Kennedy was president, talked after the Cuban Missile Crisis, talked about an escalation. Being in an escalation structure in the Cold War for the proliferation of nuclear weapons, and how do we get off that line and get into where we can reason and come up with solutions for this situation with then the Soviets. And that's the same thing here. Social media has created an exacerbated conflict escalation.
Yes.
That how do you get those two sides to talk to each other if they've already insulted each other in public, rapidly before anyone's had time to. You can't have a successful
by clicking the send button too.
Yes.
Just by they don't even have to physically or personally engage with somebody. Yeah. And I think that's part of the misinformation that then spreads additional misinformation. And while I'm not happy with the way this governor and the administration has handled natural resource management in the state of Colorado, I understand that the people that are working under that umbrella don't have full and complete control, and they can't handle or delegate all the drama that's being thrown at them from so many different levels because it's not in their purview, and that they don't play the game like that. And government plays social media and technological advancements very piss poorly. They don't deal with all the stuff that's going on, but all that stuff that goes on affects their ability to be able to turn around and manage.
And this takes us back to what we were talking about earlier. The part of the frustration with the commission losing its strong independence that it always had was you can go in and work something out with them. When I went to work for Governor Hickenlooper, people in the field, rural communities and ag producers knew that I went right back and reported to the governor and could get him an answer. In other words, no one interfered with my job. That was part of the arrangement I had with then Governor Hickenlooper was I reported directly to him, no one in between, to resolve some of these rural issues that we had. And the people that I was negotiating with knew, while I wasn't exactly the decision maker, I had a direct line to the decision maker, and I could address their problem or try to address their problem. The problem with what's happened now is I like Jeff Davis. I like working with Jeff. I've known the people at CPW for 30 years, most of them. Enjoy working with them. They've been extremely helpful over the years, but they're no longer the decision maker. And so you're interfacing with them and saying to yourself, I'm working with the wrong person.
It makes it feel
I'm not working with the decision maker. How do I get where I can talk to?
Makes it feel like you're talking to the water boy when you're actually trying to get a play run into the coach.
And that's not saying anything bad about the people at CPW. It's just sad to me that they've been put in an impossible situation where they're not making these decisions. They're being made above their level, and they do their best to maintain their relationships, but it's pretty hard when you can't deliver.
Well, if anybody didn't listen to today's commission meeting with public testimony from elected officials, you can hear the negativity or the displeasure or the lack of complacency with elected officials representing their districts and representing their constituents about their frustration. And the reason that I would encourage people to look at it, the northeast part of the state does not have wolves right now. But those legislators and those elected officials from the northeast part of the state provided their comment and frustration about something that is essentially happening 200 and some odd miles to the far west that their counterparts are having to deal with. And they're griping to the commission and to the agency because they know it's coming and they see how piss poorly it's been handled for their counterparts. They want to help get it rectified because when it comes to their door, they don't want to be left out, hanging out to dry, waiting for decisions to be made 3 parties down the road with people they don't ever get a chance to deal with.
And the value in this process was you felt like you could address your grievances. And too many state processes now, whether it's the Water Quality Control Commission at CDPHE or the Air Commission, the decision's already made before you testify. Sometimes we feel like that at the legislature,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Why are we even here testifying? Because the decision,
You know the outcome.
you already know the outcome. And the answer is because we represent people. You represent people that hunt and fish. I represent ag producers, and I won't give up on them.
Mm-hmm.
I'll keep fighting no matter what, because their way of life is Colorado's heritage.
Well, listen to the public comment over the last 4 or 8 or 12 months, and listen to the level of frustration and what they consider to be the lack of transparency and accountability.
Right.
That's disheartening when it comes to listening to the testimony of people that get up there that want some of these prohibitions and restrictions to take place, and they talk about wildlife belongs to all the people of the state of Colorado, and all the lands belong to all the people. Well, you and I and the ranchers and the other sportsmen and women must not be all the people, because they talk about it in terms of what they want, not what is actually making this a holistic, organic circle. They don't acknowledge what they're fighting against because they don't want them to even be part of the landscape or the decision-making process.
Right. But they're more than happy to allow people that buy hunting and fishing licenses to pay for the majority of the budget for those.
Yeah, because they don't have a replacement for the funding.
They don't have a replacement for the funding.
All the things that have been filtered or floated over the course of the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Is Colorado Parks and Wildlife, in your opinion, for all the things that you've been involved in, is it at a breaking point?
I think it is.
So if it continues to go at this level until January 12th of 2027,
right,
you being a prophet, what do you think happens between now and then?
I think it gets far worse. And for me, it's almost an energy calculation. And this was the conversation that we had with Roy Romer and Bill Owens was, you can impose your will on people. And state government has a tendency, and the federal government has an tendency to do that, right? They get frustrated and they just try to force their will. We need a more affordable housing, so we're going to take away county land use authority because they're the obstacle, or whatever it is. And when you try to impose your will, you create the resistance at the same level of energy that you're trying to impose it on them. What Romer figured out and what other governors realized was there's a better way to do this. It's called collaboration and partnership, where the energy works together. And I'll put what we did from the late 80s and 90s into the 2000s, the amount of conservation that was done, the amount of wildlife habitat that was preserved was incredible because of partnership and collaboration, and because people had a seat at the table. You can't get to those kind of successes imposing your will on people. If you put agriculture out of business and they subdivide into 35 acres, where do those wildlife corridors go? You can't sprinkle fairy dust on it and create it. Mm-hmm. After you've tried to impose your will and force those people off the landscape. These are the 5 generations of ranchers, 5 generations of their family have been on that land. They know it better than any federal bureaucrat or anyone from CPW. Harnessing that knowledge and putting it to work on cooperative conservation projects is what's preserved wildlife habitat. I'll put our record against the record of the last 6 years and say, what have they accomplished? There's a long list of what we accomplished from the early 90s to the late, through Hickenlooper's term. An amazing amount that we accomplished. And it's why there's still wildlife habitat in this state. Because otherwise, why wouldn't these people just say, screw it, I'm going to subdivide my property, and I'm going to buy a boat in Florida? Well,
and you hear the ag producers, the ranchers and the farmers that we were in the truck last night after dinner. And one of the individuals in there said, it's starting to sound like a pretty good deal. Sell what I got here and go somewhere else.
Right.
I mean, these people have been here for 30, 40, 50, 80, 100, 150 years. And they're like, maybe it's time to plant my flag somewhere else,
right,
and figure out how to continue to survive. That particular individual said, if you could go there and make a living somewhere else,
Right.
with the money that you could make off your property here and buy something that was less
Right.
expensive there, that might be an option. Well, I've considered stuff like that, and I know about some of my counterparts and friends have, but there's a component of stubbornness. There's a component of tradition and heritage and planting your roots and making sure that you can maintain what your family before you and your family before that has turned around and implemented for you. I'm looking at how do we get through the next 12, 13 months? And for those that don't know, and I've had this comment frequently, Governor Polis is out in November of next year through the term limits.
Right.
But he still has 2 months after that to create havoc and wreak collateral damage at whatever level. But how do you get through to this level on January 12th of 2027? And then what in the hell happens after that?
I'd like to say that that we created a sustainable process of working together that can withstand just about anything. But in recent days, I felt like the governor could burn it all down to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a sense within those communities, because I talked to them, that they want to get rid of animal agriculture altogether. And we hear those people comment at commission meetings, and they want to end hunting in our state. And it's frustrating. And I want to think that the partnerships and stuff that we built, and there's a sustainability there that can survive this. And you know what? At the end of the day, miracles happen, and some things are worth fighting for. Mm-hmm. This approach that we've come to in Colorado, the Colorado approach of working together, is more valuable than any of us. And it's worth fighting for. And I'm just not willing to give up.
Oh, that's the stubbornness.
I'm not willing to give up, because it's worth fighting for, because when I started my career, it's where we are now. And I know the difference between collaboration and partnership and what we have now. And I feel like we need to fight for it. And if we fight for it hard enough, the next governor, whoever he or she is, will go back to, this is a better way. And we've had, as you know, both of us have had those conversations with pretty much all the candidates running for governor, saying this is worth preserving and protecting, no matter what damage has been done in the last 6 years.
Do you believe the pendulum can swing back far enough to regain some of the lost ground, or do you think it goes and becomes stagnant and just doesn't actually collect any of the lost ground?
I believe it's possible that it doesn't go stagnant, that there's a way to reinvigorate it pretty quickly. And but it depends on who the governor is and who they hire. And but I'm optimistic that it can happen.
Do you think wolves are going to be a driving force in the next election? Or do you think by then, because of the wolf management plan and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service involvement and the way this administration is handling or manipulating stuff, do you think it's going to be what they can get done in the next 12 months and the new governor comes in and goes, okay, we're not dealing with that like what we did before? Or do you think it's going to be status quo?
No, I think they're going to have to deal with it. And I go back to what you did on Initiative 127. Mm-hmm. I mean, if anyone had given you betting odds and you started that, they would have said, because of, we've created an outpost for these out-of-state extremists to come in here. And that's one of the most detrimental things is you're not only are you welcome here, we encourage you to blow up all these partnerships and things that we've developed over the years. We've created an outpost. A new governor can say, you're no longer welcome here to come and bring your brand of totalitarianism and Marxism into our state. We'll resist you. And one of the problems has been is the governor has muted the scientific agency that can talk about mountain lions and hunting, and they weren't allowed to even give informational testimony within the campaign, which they're allowed to do. They're not allowed to campaign, but they're allowed to put information into the mix. And they weren't allowed to do that. A new governor could change that overnight by unmuting them and letting them speak the truth.
When legislators ask in a hearing room, we've got Parks and Wildlife staff here, and they're not allowed to speak.
Right.
There's a problem with the system. And I often wonder the way that things have played out. Why are they there to turn around and sit and listen if they're not going to turn around and speak?
Right.
It's like they want to see the fireworks, but they're not going to turn around and tell anybody that their hair's on fire.
And in the past, they've always been willing to give an opinion on the science. I mean, they develop the science. The taxpayers pay for the science. People that buy hunting and fishing license pay for the science. That science should be available to the public and, more importantly, in this case, legislators.
And it should be allowed to be spoken, maybe not at will, but when conversations arise about specific issues that they have the science and the data on, whether it's mountain lions, whether it's bears. We've heard testimony and presentations on bighorn sheep in the last couple of days, and the things on fur bearers and the things on beavers, the statewide beaver management plan. These things are going to culminate and come to a head over the course of the next 60 or 90 days. And this agency has been hogtied and manipulated to a point to where they won't be allowed to comment on a lot of it.
Right.
That's a travesty.
Well, and they have to, and it's always a problem when you're listening to how painstakingly they choose their words, even when they get questions from the commission.
Yes.
I mean, and it's bad for morale. I mean, the people that get into this line of work, they don't do it to make money. One of the things I've always admired about the Division of Wildlife and now Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the people that I've worked with there, they're in this because their heart is in this work. They love this work.
It's a lifestyle. It's not a job. It's a career and a lifestyle.
And it's public service, right? It's not the most financially rewarding career that these people could have chosen. And we've known really good people, obviously, that work for the agency, and the saddest part is watching them squirm and not be able to say what the science says. It's been almost unbearable to watch it.
From what you saw over the course of your career and the way things are right now, what piece of advice would you give agriculture producers? And we're in contact with a lot of them, you and I combined with our coalition efforts. And then with the United Wolf Coalition, me along with Gaspar and the Colorado Wildlife Conservation Project, we have a broad level of engagement. But people in and outside of those conversations, what's the best thing they can do to prepare for what we consider to be the inevitable? Something that's additionally going to be coming down the pike, and we're fighting at different levels depending on what the subject matter is. What do you give a piece of advice to somebody about how do I get involved, and what should I do, and how long should I wait to do it?
It makes a difference for people to do what they can. And I think we talked about the social media and the polarization that comes from that. And I think it's the biggest thing to cure with anyone at any level is that what they do doesn't make a difference. We've almost been educated or programmed into what we do doesn't make a difference. It doesn't matter. It isn't going to change anything. Why should I vote? But the truth is, it does matter. 127, a small group of people prevented that from passing, as you well know, right?
And the fur ban in Denver, which was in the city and county of Denver. Everybody said that was a slam dunk. That was defeated by 17 percentage points.
Right.
And now you've got these people coming right back to the agency, turning around and trying to prohibit the commercialization of fur.
Right.
The perspectives of people is different. I'm going to back up because we get into these conversations frequently. But when you listen to people on Proposition 114 about wolves, they speak about the will of the people.
Right.
But when they lost on different things, there's no will of the people left there anymore.
No.
They don't want the will of the people when it goes against them, especially when it goes against them by 10, 17, and 31 percentage points.
Right.
The will of the people doesn't matter on that, just the will of the people on what we want.
Yeah.
Going back to my question, what do people do to get engaged without turning around and dedicating their entire life like what you and I and others have, but they still have to be additive. How do we convey a message to them to say just what you alluded to? Step up, your voice, your vote, your money, your engagement matters.
Right, it does. And I mean, we saw that today in public comment. We had a lot of people organically show up, unlike the opposition that pays people to come in, and none of these people were paid to be here today on this side, and they made a difference by just opening their hearts and speaking honestly about it. But the other thing, we've tried to do with the Wolf Coalition, as you know, is create a forum for people to be involved, and then try to give them professional representation and their contributions. You can contribute. If you can contribute $10, great. If you can contribute more, great. If you can go to a meeting, great. But we've got some big things coming up, and you know what we really need? We need people to show up. We need people to show up. Take, a day out of your life and come here and let people know what you think. And
even if they don't speak, if they just show up and support the opposition to something that they don't want to happen, and make sure that if something comes up and I completely disagree with that, take the 4 hours and drive from Craig, or come up for 4 hours from the San Luis Valley, or 3 hours from Sterling, or wherever it might be. Because as you saw county commissioners from the Northeast today gripe and bitch and complain about what they thought was inevitable down the road, it's inevitable closer to the nucleus of Denver, that if it's allowed to happen there, it's easy for them to turn around and grow and magnify their perspective, especially in an administration who has appointed and hired many, many different people in many different positions, that maybe some have higher aspirations of what they want to accomplish politically. Maybe they've got interest in skin in the game, that maybe there's financial implications, and I'm not alluding to anything, but people have ulterior motives to do things. And what's interesting, I think what we've heard more often than not from the sporting community, and I've heard it pretty significantly from the ag community, these people don't even have any skin in the game. Why the hell are they making the decisions on me? Well, that's the agenda-driven side. We'll put people in places to help make the decisions and give the facade that everybody else has a chance to input. We need coalitions to pop up all over the place, like what you helped create with Lauren on the United Wolf Coalition, what Gaspar and I did with CWCP, these other nuanced coalitions that we've been able to build off the coattails of 127. Do you see there's a sense of urgency because of the time is getting closer and closer to Governor Polis being out? Is it too late?
I don't think so. One of the things I've been most gratified about, and as you know, was one of my goals when I came out of retirement to try to help here, was the sense that people that hunt and fish, people that recreate, people that do conservation, people that are in agriculture need to work together. And we haven't always done that. When the trapping bans and things were going on, a lot of people in agriculture just sat on their hands and didn't help out their people.
Didn't think it was going to affect them.
Well, and it didn't, but the only path to mitigate the damage that's been done is if we work together with people we don't ordinarily work with. And we've done that to some degree. And it's really important. I never thought, and I'm not disparaging either organization, I love both of them, but when 114 passed, the Farm Bureau and the Cattlemen's Association didn't work together. They had their separate, even in agriculture, you had these silos, and we've got to break all that down, because our opponents, the people that want to impose what we're seeing on us, they're very well organized. And the only way we can counter that is to create the kind of partnerships amongst the people that use the outdoors.
Well, not only are they well organized and funded, they have the support of people in charge, the decision makers, that in administrations or at levels of government, that the majority of Colorado voters that voted for that.
Right.
But a lot of people there, again, sat on the sidelines and didn't participate at a variety of different levels.
Right.
One thing that we were successful on 127 and on 308 was we took the fight to the enemy. They brought it to us and we took it back, and we forced them to try to recognize something that they never had to deal with, at least in my lifetime.
Right.
And we let the voters know how much bullshit this was.
Right.
They made educated decisions because we went back to the agency and we said, trust the science. Don't trust the idiots over here. Don't listen to us. Trust the science. I think that's the only argument that we have to be able to stand on. And that's something that sportsmen and women and ag producers can get behind, because the only other option is if you don't trust the agency, if you don't give the agency the ability to do what they need to, even though they're manipulated to the point because of this administration. If you don't trust them, who are you going to trust?
Right.
The ones trying to take it away?
Yeah. And the other thing I think that you were really successful at in 127, and we've tried to accentuate that with the coalition, is for so many of us, with the demise of the media, we have assumed that they'll just give the Governor Polis line no matter what, and we challenged that. We now have developed reporters across the state that have a deeper understanding of these issues and will write honest stories. Now, when we started that, a lot of people in their lethargy would say, oh, it isn't worth it. They're all against us. It's an impossible thing. But you didn't say that. And we're not saying that. We're saying we're developing relationships with reporters that can write honest stories about the science, about what's happening. And that's starting to pay dividends. I mean, we're holding our own in what used to be a media dominated by the activists they used to dominate that story. We're starting to hold our own. That's a huge achievement. And we could have said, oh, that's just impossible. Why would we take that on? And that talks about the lethargy that you're talking about. We went for it. And with very little chance of success when we started, right? But we're turning people around. You know why? Because what the sustainable partnership collaboration structure that we're talking about, it's self-evident that it works. And the fruit of that labor has created wildlife habitat all over and maintained it all over the state. Our story is compelling. And we need to tell it.
Well, and 90 some odd percent of the people in the state of Colorado eat meat.
Right.
Or they enjoy outdoor recreation. And maybe it's not the same sort of outdoor recreation that I have when I go buy a license and go pursue something, even though my success rate might be in the 9 or 10%.
Right.
There's a level of camaraderie in the sense to where, as living, breathing human beings, we choose to do something different than a minority of the population that then has the squeaky wheel that wants to change the way 90% of the population lives. Look at Oregon, for example. Them trying to create a sanctuary state up there where you can't kill a mouse and you can't fish and you can't turn around and hunt, you can't raise chickens and you can't raise pigs. But there's a faction of that mentality that is here in this administration, that they are anti-ag, anti-consumptive use, anti-wildlife management. They're anti-wildlife and domestication, period. Listen to the people talk today that we should not have domesticated buffalo. The reason that we have a large population of buffalo in the United States and Canada is because domestication became part of the deal. And that's how the buffalo herds survived, by people taking them and raising them 125 years ago. They don't acknowledge that. Now they want all the buffalo to become wild. Now they want eminent domain on private property so wolves can turn around and live in peace and not have to have conflict with livestock producers. They don't want what you and I have and what we live for and what we strive for. And when it really gets down to it, if you look at Initiative 82 and Initiative 98 that have been floated through the Legislative Council and maybe through the Title Board, they want this individual separate commission to be created to disband and defund the current agency and the management process and transparency that we have, so they can create their own deal with a $150 million tax base to impose keystone species and the way private and public lands are managed, not through science,
Right.
through these individuals that want to bring their policies and perspectives into place. And I think that those things are, it's a minority. It's a minute segment of the population.
Right.
But look how much traction that they get. Look how much enthusiasm that they bring to the table with a few voices. There again, because of political ramifications,
Right.
elections have consequences. And when people don't pay attention, things, I remember Shane Mahoney saying, wildlife does not happen by accident.
Right.
Well, either do elections. They are meant to happen for a reason. And if we don't impose our attempt to try to alter that, we end up in the same circumstances that we have now, and we wonder how the hell we get out of it.
When you think about the value of a North American wildlife model and what it replaced a lord owned the land in Europe, and the peasants, if they hunted without permission of the lord, were put in prison or punished, right? I mean, and it's almost like they want to go back to that elitist, we created a way for ordinary people to be involved in hunting and fishing and recreation, and without getting permission from elites or a lord in the case of Europe, right? They're trying to go back to that. Well, the North American model has done more to perpetuate wildlife in our country than any other model that's ever been created. And they want to destroy that to do what? To take us back to where we had a king or a lord, prescribing for us.
Under the guise of rewilding.
Right.
That all this chronicles a Narnia mentality that we're all going to get together and we're going to do our thing and all the wildlife's going to do their thing. And they're going to do it naturally.
Right.
And we're supposed to just turn around and be over here doing whatever the hell we do that doesn't have anything to do with domestication of animals or with wildlife per se. It's frustrating because our side, and I said this for the campaign and I've said it post-campaign, our side with some engagement could be undeniably the most forceful opposition to this lunacy that has been created because of a few squeaky wheels that want to get greased.
Yeah, no question about it. And the North American model that we support produces outcomes. They're measurable. I just look at the quality of land that the federal government manages in our state, in Colorado, versus what's on private ground. And the people that bitch about, federal grazing leases, right? What they forget about is the winter range for wildlife is private ground, right? That's an even exchange.
Yeah.
We're just giving these landowners these grazing rights on federal land. No, the winter habitat's all on private land. There's an even exchange in that benefits wildlife. And they want to separate those two things for what purpose?
For their
show me where the great wildlife habitat is on land managed by the federal government. I don't see it.
Yeah.
A bureaucrat. I'd rather have a fifth generation landowner than a bureaucrat managing land any day. And I'm not saying anything about disposing of federal lands. Public lands are really important and they're integral. And, I worked on Sand Dunes National Park and other things in the course of my career. Very happy about that outcome there. We worked with the local community in Alamosa and other places to do that, but very happy with that. But these things have to work together. Why create adversarial structures where we have to be opposed? Why can't the federal government work with the state, work with CPW, work with the landowners, work with the counties, and come up with something that's sustainable and lasts and benefits wildlife? We can.
You've done it.
We've done it. We've proven it works. So why go back to I just don't understand the logic of going back to the other component to it that I think is really crazy is that human beings aren't part of nature.
Oh yeah.
They act like human beings are a cancer, and if we just let nature be,
everything was fine until we came here.
Right.
And that might very well be the case, but I don't see them willing to sell their shit and get out of Dodge.
Right.
I mean that if you heard all that, and you get into the misnomers about, well, if Trump gets elected, I'm moving out.
Right.
Well, I don't see any of these people turn around saying it's so bad here that I got to pack my bags and I'm going to go to Argentina, Venezuela.
Right.
I mean, what we have created, it's the envy of the world with the North American model of wildlife conservation. And it's North America with Canada and the United States as well. What we have is undeniably the most popular design that countries and continents are trying to emulate in some way, shape, or form. The difference being is that if they can do that under their totalitarian, authoritarian government styles, then the wildlife becomes more privatized. And it becomes like in South Africa or in Europe or in New Zealand. It's not necessarily the public side of it, but the public-private partnership that has been created here sometimes gets ignored and often bastardized because the ones that are making headway and actually boots on the ground experience and making this work don't have the time and the opportunity, although they've been forced to in the last 5 years in Colorado, to go fight for the ability to continue to do what they've been doing for the last 5 generations. They're like, why am I always being attacked? Why am I bastardized? Why am I turning around and being ostracized for something that we've been doing? And the reason that they have the opportunity to bitch about it is because our families and our generations on our coalitions and our stewardship of natural resources and land has provided them with what they have. And now they want us gone.
And there's a interesting thing with the pendulum swing in politics. You get a new administration in DC and they try to undo everything that the prior administration. And the great thing about the North American model and these partnerships and collaboration that we've created is it's been relatively immune to that because it's sustainable, it works. And we often, fortunately, get overlooked. Why would we create a structure where we're vulnerable to whoever becomes president of this country or whoever becomes governor of this? We built something that was kind of sustainable and could last through almost any administration because it's solid, it works, and we're not subject to the whims of, this one comes in, and then you get in that thing where, this species is listed and now it's not listed, and it's not, and you can't put any good programs in place to enhance that wildlife habitat because the rules keep changing between administrations. We need to create an immunity to that kind of political polarization because of the collaboration, because of the partnerships, and the real thing is because of the relationships. The thing that's been most damaged, I think, are the relationships. You talked about it with the social media. I have 9 reasons to be unhappy with this person, but I found that the biggest outcomes come when you work with people you disagree with, and you get to know them and get to know their heart. And I'm not talking about the radical extremist groups, but I'm talking about the people that just have a different view. That's where the good stuff comes from. And we've got to keep those conversations going. And this governor's done more than any to shut down those conversations. And they're valuable.
I know that we could have a conversation that could last weeks just because we work together so closely. And the situation is so broad and there's so many subjects that are thrown into a pot, stirred like a witch's cauldron to see what the hell they're going to come out. Moving forward into December, January, February, March, April, May, I mean, we're getting halfway through the remainder of this governor's administration. Where do you find our communities, agriculture, and we're going to give secrets away when we talk about this because our enemies are watching these podcasts as well. Where do you find us to be most vulnerable that can be fixed so we can at least come out of this not smelling like a bag of shit?
Strong interior lines. That's kind of a warfare, thing, but we have to have strong interior lines, no break in the line, which means that the ag people show up for the people that hunt when they're under attack, and the people that hunt show up for the ag people when they're under attack. No breaks in the line, and get more people to show up at these wildlife commission meetings, turn out. Local elected officials, being a county commissioner is a tough job. I have so much respect for those people today that showed up Some drove a great distance to be here.
Mhm.
That matters, but no breaks in the line. We need to unify the people that want to protect Colorado's heritage. We need to unify them, and they need to show up for each other. No breaks in the line. It's the only way,
Mhm.
because we have concentrated opposition that's well funded. And unlike them, most of the people that show up here aren't getting paid.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? They're not booking their expenses. I mean, they're doing this out of their own pockets.
Right.
And back when they were, Maria Garcia Berry, who I think you know, who was involved in those two initiatives
Yep.
in Denver, Maria looked at, what could we do on 35-acre development, because that's an area where you can lose wildlife habitat and other things. And they did a bunch of focus groups, and they did some really interesting stuff. But one of the things they came out with is that even along the Front Range, these ranchers and people that hunt and fish, there's kind of a respect for those people.
Mhm.
And I think these aren't people that tell their stories, but their stories are compelling. And Maria realized how important those stories were and how influential they could be in a ballot initiative, and you've done so much to have people come forward and tell their stories. You did that on 127. We need to do more of that. And I think it matters.
Mhm.
Even though a lot of people on the Front Range don't know where their water comes from, they don't know where their food comes from, these stories are Colorado to the core, and they need to be told.
Mhm.
And it makes a difference when they're told. And I just think that inspiring, encouraging these people to tell they're shy people. They just want to be left alone.
Yeah.
And we worked really hard to get them out of that spot and say, no, today you're living in times where you have to tell your story now. I mean, Byron Pelton, Senator Pelton,
Oh, yeah.
former Commissioner Pelton, did that with the meat out, that whole meat out thing.
Yeah.
People turned out.
Mhm.
They realized, well, what do you mean? You're going to ban meat in the state?
Mhm.
And he turned out thousands of people at those meet-in events all across the rural Colorado, and it kind of took on an energy.
Well, look what we've done just at the Capitol as an example with the conservation-minded individuals, Sportsman's Day at the Capitol.
Right. Yes.
And creating lobbying representation at the Capitol, and then working with the ag communities. And it's like today we were sitting with Aaron Spohr with Cattlemen's Association,
Yeah.
and we're sitting with other county commissioners, and we're sitting with Andy Spann with the Gunnison stock growers, and
Right.
you have these interworking relationships because, and I really honestly believe this, standing together, there's a harder opportunity to break through that line.
Right.
But when you don't show up,
Right.
there's a void and a gap.
Right.
They know that you're there,
Yeah.
but if you're way back there
Right.
and you haven't showed up, it's a lot easier for them to turn around and break through that line. And I'm seeing a coalition-minded effort of like-minded individuals in the state of Colorado that are able to message to that 90% that eats meat, that believes in agriculture, some of which participate in consumptive use activities, whether it's
Right.
fishing or hunting or whatever.
Right.
And it's just like the cowboy hat deal last year, just like the fur ban that incorporated Native American crafts, fishing lures, and cowboy hats.
Right.
Okay, we're up against the wall again with another deal going to the commission. But all of those people that I just mentioned have somebody that they engage in those activities, or they do themselves. That's a coalition. That's a like-minded individuals that says, well, I don't really do that, but I eat meat. I know a rancher.
Yeah.
My uncle's a chicken farmer.
Right.
Or I have a fishing guide in my family.
Right.
It affects everybody that you know in some way, shape, or
Right.
form. But it's that small, minute, squeaky wheel that's over here trying to take all of that and degrade and erode it and capitalize
Yeah.
on the chinks in the armor that are created inadvertently and unintentionally just because we don't think that we're on the same page
Right.
together.
And I think it's almost a Winston Churchill moment, right? A Dunkirk moment.
Yep.
Where, we're finished.
Mhm.
And the only one that wasn't finished was Winston Churchill, and he held England together, and he rescued 300,000 troops, from Dunkirk, when his own military told him it was impossible. It's people just saying, no,
Yes.
I've had enough. I'm not putting up with it anymore. I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna join a coalition, and that makes all the difference in the world. On paper, in so many ways, because of this administration, we're beaten. But that's not what decides the outcome. What decides the outcome are people.
The only thing that we've lost significantly, there's been a lot of small things, significantly, is wolves on Proposition 114.
Right.
And that's because a significant amount of the voting population did not turn out.
Right.
I personally believe a lot of that had to do with COVID.
Yeah.
I believe that it had to do with the lack of paying attention. Maybe that's not strategic planning, but the Trump era and COVID did not help voter turnout when it came to be such an important component. Every single thing else that they've tried to take away, except for guns, which we're not talking about guns. No. That's a completely different faction.
Yeah.
I'm talking about wildlife and agriculture. We have been victorious on and held the line.
Right.
Maybe there's some compromise, maybe there's some negotiation, but more often than not, it's been an 11-0 vote in our favor.
Yes.
Over and over. When we went to the legislature, we won 4-1. We turn around and win another deal 8-3.
Right.
We have won handily because people that are making the decisions are in our circle.
Right.
They eat meat.
Right.
They turn around and understand agriculture. They want sound wildlife management. Right. They're not lunatics sitting on the side over there trying to get something done. And I think what you just said helps substantiate the opportunity for continued engagement and involvement over the next 14 months to make sure that we transition into a new governor that understands the values and ethics and morals, the tradition and heritage of what Colorado was, is, and what it needs to continue to be moving forward. And if we don't have that mentality, I don't know what you do. You just turn around and quit and throw your hands up and go to Mississippi.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to do that. I hate mosquitoes and I don't like humidity.
And again, it's worth fighting for. It is. And that's, and the benefit of it, and the benefit of the North American model, the benefit of collaboration and partnership is it's self-evident that it works. We don't have to put spreadsheets together. We don't have to do anything. It's self-evident that it works. And there's power in that. We don't have to distort the truth.
Right.
As the proponents of 127 did, and try to make it look like something is not. We just have to tell the truth. There's a huge advantage with people telling the truth.
And listening to testimony today about give the people the opportunity to have representation. Well, I don't know who the hell they're listening to, because on the ballot initiatives and everything else, the people have had the opportunity.
Right.
And we have been successful in defeating those efforts that now they forget even happened because it didn't go in their favor.
Right.
John, I appreciate the time. I know you got to get on the road. You and I have a lot in common, coming from different backgrounds. I appreciate being included into your circles because I think it's valuable. But we have a lot to do over the course of the next 12 or 14 months. And I'm going to coin the phrase about not breaking the line. And making sure that we stay landlocked in arms to make sure that we can't be pushed aside.
Attack on one of us is an attack on all of us.
Thank you very much, John. Swartout.
Thanks, Shan.
Look forward to it.
All right.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Through the Gates. For more content like this, make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe on all of our channels.